All right, yeah, it looks like it's live. This is Pyrrho here with obviously with Hythloday, also obviously probably most
Oh,
everybody watching knows you, Hythloday.
phew.
So um, yeah, I don't know. You, you should introduce yourself. No, so let's see. I wrote down from the comment some topics to talk about. There's nothing very, just real quick things: science, ethics, politics, life, and spiritualism. So
Mm.
but the
Well,
spiritualism has a question mark, so I figured I would do it in the order you said, and we'll leave that last. And if we,
yeah.
so
Just
that'll.
just just prior to we're going to live though, I thought you wondered about hinting about talking about some of our disagreements, or I just wondered
Yeah.
how many you could recount our when we got quite acrimonious at points, I think, and just wondered how
Yes.
many you recall. I can remember at least three.
Oh, really?
Uh,
Well, you should go through them.
from,
And let me tell you, I've narrowed it down to one because I think I
have you?
probably, yeah, I have a big tolerance for that sort of thing. I mean,
Mm.
I like in a
Oh,
work context, if you're being creative and architecting software, um, uh, I believe you have to have heated discussions. So probably some of the heated discussions I ignored as conflicts. But the main one to me was, and this I was going to bring it up, but it was in the politics category. But okay, let's start with it and see if we make it past there. It was when I was suggesting my idea, which I still have just as much, I just don't harp on this stuff, of a kind of a commissary for
yeah,
social security people that obviously is incrementalism towards just having that commissary that anybody could go to, like I love the government pens,
yeah,
federal government pens, and you were saying, but isn't that communist? And I'm like, well,
yeah,
okay, there's an issue there,
yeah.
but no. And then we had tried to have a live talk like this, only on Skype, and it all fell apart. I had rules, and you agreed, but you weren't fair. And then an hour in, I gave up, and I got
Yeah,
drunk. And so probably sobriety will help this time at the very least. But I think there's more to it than that. You and I have
yeah.
become good chums, I think, in the last 2 years or
I like to think so. I, I, um, I remember us. I thought it got tenuous, strenuous, um, with the quantum mechanics debate,
yeah.
and yeah, I kind of partitioned the what did you call it? The system of government sort of run market, special kind of
hmm
internal market. Was it? What was the word you used
I
for
think
that?
I was calling it a
Commissary.
commissary. Yeah,
That's it.
like a
Yeah, yeah.
military commissary is
So,
fine.
so I kind of partitioned that into two separate fallouts
Oh,
almost
I see.
because we was getting strenuous. It was strained
Definitely.
in the video exchanges. So we said let's just stop here and let's finish it on live, and that in itself brought about a whole host of um, probably the worst probably of it, like you said. The
Yeah.
others probably weren't falling out in the same sense, but anyway, it was fun. It was fun. I'm a lot more is the word circumspect about it. I try not to take it as seriously now. I still fall out with Gary a little, and now I try not to really think of myself genuinely dialoguing with anybody,
hmm
because the medium might
Yeah.
just trash it just break down.
Yeah.
Probably not through ill will, but anyway.
Well, I mean, my deal, and it has been for a long time, is that I kind of have a metaphor where communication is like chemistry, and if you have, and we're looking for active topics, reaction is part of that, and so the heat and light, that's generated, is that's a part of it. That's a part of when what we're looking for an actual reaction, and that's why I like discussing things with people I have differences with, and I have a high tolerance and also a high respect for people that I'm conversing with that can also handle that. And this is one of the things about Gary, is that in a lot of ways he can handle it and come back to neutral again and then go off and stuff. I mean, my only thing with Gary right now is I'm tired of saying, hey, I'll go in there for an hour, and I don't know if it's going to be an hour or zero. I'm a planner, and I can't
Mm,
plan around that. But but on the other hand, that is not what happened with you and me. I just freaking, I was really pissed at you. I was like more pissed at you than I
Likewise,
get
you
at
know what
trolls.
I mean?
Then I get at trolls that are pissing me off on purpose. As a matter of fact, hardly, I don't think there's ever been a troll that could piss me off on purpose. I'm ready for it. But I think that was also because I saw that you had a sincere opinion, and so I didn't prepare myself the way I would against somebody that is obviously trying to push my buttons. But what about that topic itself? I wonder what your views are on it, because so the idea is we make, and I assume all governments do this, but in the U.S. we have this a lot of, it's mostly cleaning supplies and office supplies, but they make a lot of things now for the government. I worked for the government, for NASA and whatnot, and they have pens that don't run out of ink for years. They're actually filled
Mm,
to the brim. And they've been the same. They come in brown packages. They're as cheap as possible. It's very efficient. It's always bugged me that we as citizens could not buy that. And then,
mm,
but the idea in this case was, hey, you have, just to remind you, and I guess anybody watching, that you have Social Security people are in these fixed incomes. Why not let them go to the commissary? The prices get set like at their age of retirement, and then we have better control, because if you're just giving cash to people, then if the price of tires and gasoline go up, you need to give them more cash. But some people don't even use the gasoline; they use public transportation. If they have the ability, and they're not required to go there, but if they have the ability to go to a commissary type place with fixed prices, and both are subsidized for things like gasoline that's not a part of what the government makes, and also benefit from things that the government has kept at a steady price. I mean, those pens have cost a quarter or 50 cents or whatever, for the government, or whatever it is, I don't know what the
mm,
price is, forever. You could control it, because you'd say, oh, the price of gas has gotten up. Well, we subsidize it in this commissary. You don't
mm,
just have to, it's a, just from a system dynamics kind of programmer point of view, or for that matter, a mathematician, you can see that you have this complex equation of everything you need to have a decent standard of living. Well, it's easier if you can subsidize the prices of particular goods instead of just compensate at the end of the formula where everything's been summed together. So that was the idea, and you didn't seem, my recollection is you didn't seem against it per se, but you were
yeah,
concerned that all of the arguments against socialism might come to bear on that, and therefore it's like a touchy subject
yeah.
or
Well,
dangerous.
all I was looking for is really a concession that the criticisms of a planned economy, yeah, will come to bear on your small section, because there's no real capitalist system, is there? Complete no market economy. Everything's a mixed system, and what you're talking about is increasing the amount of planned economy within the nation. And at first blush, it sounds great. Um, my mother brought me up a communist. She's still a communist. Um, I don't know. I wouldn't label myself one way or the other. I would say I see some utility in markets
Hmm.
where values aren't at stake. But she used to say to me, why do we make, just like you said about the pens? She'd say, why do we make like a range of television sets, like a supreme good one, and then the next range, and why can't everybody just have the good one? And you just said, I felt you sort of pointed to that when you said, we fill our pens up to the top, and they seem to
Yeah,
last
no, it's
forever.
similar in that
It,
respect.
and the point is that I don't think it's recognised enough by the market economists, guys, is that it itself gets subverted and gets built in inefficiencies, by people getting too big and too profiteering. It actually undermines the purpose that we want, which is, I used to keep saying a phrase to you, which was the allocation of scarce resources among competing ends, I think it was, which I encapsulate that as economics, and I picked that up from somewhere.
Hmm.
So back to your point though about, yeah, it sounds great, and all I'm saying is, well, yeah, it seems like a lot of social justice there, but, well, two things. This is a second pin, I would say, on it. First was, as you know, I criticised them that it might succumb to the criticisms that go to planned economies, full stop.
Hmm.
Like, just static and inefficiency grows, and
And just one TV.
in the beginning it sounds like a wonderful idea, but everybody, they start protecting their areas. This guy who buys pens is like, becomes like a mafia leader of pens, and you know what I mean. And
Hmm.
he just basically over orders or under orders. He's no market feedback as to,
Hmm.
and the other is kind of coupled. The point is with the market business and pens, for instance, the idea that markets provide a kind of choice. The guy, the commissary leader of pens, he's happy to stay with that same pen for 20, 30, 40, 50 his entire life, where a market might develop new and stylish pens. Maybe we like stylish pens.
Well, yeah. For example.
I'll just finish with one point,
Okay, go ahead.
please.
Sorry.
The last thing would be that I would say is that you create a clear two-tier society. Is
Hmm.
the other worry I would be. In the UK, we used to have government issued school clothing, yeah, for really poor children, and it was kind of an insult to dignity, that they would turn up in these really terrible um, government clothing, you
Hmm.
know. And in the end, they now get, or they used to get. God knows where we're at with social help now, but they changed it to money, and allowing them the choice to go in the market and buy clothing, and so they didn't stand out, So
Hmm.
that's the second danger. First
Right.
danger was, well, the lecture about why communism fails, and the second point would be
Yeah.
this two-tier business sounds dangerous.
Right, and I wasn't willing to make the concession the way you put it. On the other hand, I was trying to make half of it. I think I could probably put it better now in that, yeah, I do concede there are problems with planned economies. I believe in market economies. I actually, for example, am not one that I'm happy with the U.S. medical. Well, I'm not happy with it. There's things I'm not happy about with Obamacare, but I like this Romney Care part where private insurance companies get to take part and there's market dynamics, and I was going to say too, by way of concession, that with pens, um, this government pen maker, they now make all kinds of highlighters and other pens and laser pointers and things that the market came up with, that that the government as a customer never insisted
Mm,
were created, because the government's like, we're going to the moon, make one that writes upside down. They will demand products, but they're not very creative in it. And so the only way this thing has kept up and with a selection of office supplies has been through copying the market after the market demonstrates itself for 20, 30 years, or 20 years, and it's like, yep, people want whiteout, then they start producing whiteout. And so you definitely need a market, and I will concede the part that this increases the amount of planning. And the other thing that I actually also agree with as a more direct danger of this kind of thing, especially with the fact that I will admit that I kind of have an incrementalist approach to it. I do believe, that it wouldn't just, that in the long run, why would just Social Security beneficiaries go there? And because of economies of scale, well, you'd also have people on public assistance going there, and then you have this tiering of society, right? So on the other hand, I think it's the part where I'm not worried that the pen, big pens have also been the same, the cheap kind, the main kind, for a long time, and I don't approve of the part where they just don't want to compete. The government makes these pens right now because they are the biggest consumer of pens in this nation, probably, and so they're making this pen. There's no reason I shouldn't be able to buy that pen and that I should have to go buy pens that are only filled up a quarter of the way because of some market dynamic. You know what I mean? So I want a balance, and I guess I'm willing to risk, but I do acknowledge that there's risks to that.
Just to be clear, so you want this not only this commissary for like the hard up, the poor, but open to anybody, so to speak. So the commissary would
Yeah.
be a competitor in the market.
Well, okay, that my belief is with the office and cleaning supplies, we should be able to buy them, and I could buy them online or whatever, whether we open the commissary as a physical, store or not. My idea back then, just to be clear, since we're talking kind of two things at once, which is the scrap we got in as well as this idea, was the Social Security as a way to deal with a fixed income situation, right? Where you could control the supply, you can subsidize on the supply side. But yeah, I basically do think that when the government gets a contract to get things at a certain price, the people should be able to buy it as well. I believe,
So,
I think that we should be able to do that.
so the instant remark I could say, or I certainly know market guys would say, is you're placing us at an unfair advantage. You have a huge monopoly, on these buying. I mean, I'm against
Hmm.
companies getting too big because the economies of scale, whilst good in a capitalistic sense, once you allow the scale to get too big, it become controlling, and I'm
Yeah.
against them. There's I want companies, like I said, where there's no ethical issues, to be as efficient as possible.
Yeah.
And it, but up until the point where, if they say we can have more efficiency if we scale up, usually not. That's just like an easier solution for them, is to scale up rather than genuinely. Because I've worked in lots of companies, and you see the inefficiencies, uh, you know, are huge everywhere. Same ones in same companies, yet they scale up to mask the doing the real job on the shop floor. Anyway, so
Hmm.
my point is I don't agree with letting them get too big. So I wouldn't agree in the market system, and I would certainly understand the complaint then of every other smaller pen manufacturer that they're getting put out of business because the government is supplying job logs.
But why can't they just, their job be innovation with something like pens, or even let's take something that I think is harder for me to defend. Let's say we've had cell phones for 25 years or whatever, and so the government needs government issue cell phones, and there's this commissary, and because of all of that, they're actually in there building, a phone. And just to set up the ideas, they're building a phone at cost, adding the 10% or whatever it is for the overhead to keep things going and have a margin for wasted inventory, that kind of thing. So it's basically going to probably be cheap because there's nobody invested in the company that needs to take profits, but maybe the government is doing that. Maybe instead of taxes where they're taking profits, that would be dangerous. I wouldn't like that. That's a danger. But anyway, sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent. But they're providing this phone, and it's like, it's like a Soviet bloc era phone. It's probably too bulky. And is that going to stop Apple from making the iPhone? Should we have all? I mean, why does somebody need to? If the
Well,
government says here's the new minimum standard, why can't the market come in and innovate? The government commissary is not selling laser point lasers. Finally get cheap. Well, the government isn't the first person selling laser pointers. Some entrepreneur gets to. Yeah, 30 years later, the government says, oh, everybody wants these in business to give presentations. We'll manufacture them. And that entrepreneur is like, well, he got his 30-year run, and if he wants to keep going, somebody in that company better think up the next, super duper widget.
that that strikes on two questions you asked there. The first, which my mind hung on for a while, was the idea of why can't we leave innovation to them? And the second thing I heard you is sort of referencing to the idea, that the big bricks of mobile phones that you get from the commissary. Obviously, not necessarily, not in this technological age. Um, But the point is again, that strikes to this concern I have about two-tier society. So I pull out my brick of a mobile phone, and everybody's, ha ha, you're poor, yeah. And this. So if you constrain it to the extent you say, then you create this poor people's quality,
Uh,
yeah, and this rich people's quality. If you
okay.
don't constrain it and you say, okay, somehow we want to provide the best of everything for everybody at cheap prices, but we want innovation, and there are ideas beyond market economies to create innovation. Joseph Stiglitz, who I've read quite a bit of, says it's not unheard of to sort of offer prizes to companies, to just say, look, we've had this mobile for 10 years. There's a contract up, there's 10 million just to be in the game, with a further, basically a reward, and a reward system like that,
The problem is
rather
some
than
individual
markets.
decides who wins that
Mm.
contest. You need to have a market of judges, right?
Well, you would have to. That would be a separate question in deciding on how you decide. Yeah, and agree on some fair principles in that. But yeah, it still concerns me. Um, you know, this
I
this
guess
whole
I'm more
business.
open than I used to be because this is being better food for thought, even though I heard you say this a couple of years ago, and I remember.
Mm.
But yeah, well, I guess I have to retract well, not retract it as a concession, but I have to retract that as far as the two-tiered society, while I'm concerned about that, I guess I don't really have an innate concern about it because I want that thing. I want this cheap. I'm a utilitarian, you know what I mean? So I don't. It's like
Oh
I
yeah,
probably buy that phone. I went
oh
into
yeah.
the.
You're a utilitarian. I just row with everybody who's a utilitarian all the
Well,
time.
I'm not a British
It's a bit of a
philosophic
surprise.
utilitarian. I'm a utilitarian in the sense, in the practical sense of the word. Yeah, I like things that are useful. I haven't since I was 16 lusted after a Porsche 928, though they're a beautiful vehicle. I want a practical things usually, um, and I like quality, but even then, I don't, brand name, nothing. There's something that shows that you're wealthy as a status means nothing to me. So in that sense, I'm a utilitarian. I want access to things
Functional,
that
that
last.
sounds like. That's a
Okay, yeah,
functional area, maybe. I don't
sure,
know.
sure, yeah. Well, yeah, not definitely not utilitarian in the maximizing
Yeah.
joy philosophical sense. Yeah, and so anyway, I don't really have like an innate feel of I don't feel this two-tiered thing in that way.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, but the thing is, you have to consider what other people.
yeah,
My son's mother, she recounted to me the tale about state clothing and how awful it was to have to wear it. In When I was at school, we used to have what you call national health spectacles, yeah, and it was pretty horrible, you know. Um, so I consider myself to be similar, not overly bothered about having brand things. If it looks good, it looks good. If it works good, it works good. You
uh,
know,
they can also just be cheap though, and not be
yeah,
the
I
very
got
good glasses, and you're stuck with them.
this laptop. I think it's a Lenovo, which is supposedly a really big manufacturer, but it's not. Your Sony, your iPad, or anything. It was the cheapest of cheaps. It looked really good value for what it was.
Yeah, I bought a
So
Lenovo too for a similar
uh,
reason. The thing
yeah,
is, by the way, just let's talk about tangent here. That is the IBM. IBM sold their laptop company, and that's
right,
Lenovo. And so it's got a lot of quality, but one thing they did is sort of cheap it down, uh,
yeah.
and
Well,
in ways that were okay.
yeah.
Um, I think, but because IBM was like these things
Mm.
were industrial strength. You
Well,
couldn't get a cheap laptop from IBM before they sold it. But yeah,
I'm really impressed.
I know what you mean though, because I went in there. Um, to buy a laptop when I moved to Maine, and it was kind of a go to one of these box stores and get a laptop. And in the end, I didn't want anything too high end because I was going to spend my investment on an actual Linux desktop for programming, and I just needed a laptop and I needed a Windows machine, and I didn't want to get the netbook level, but pretty much I was looking at the most reasonable for something that I thought could actually, run stuff and be decent. And so that's a perfect example. I think they are a
But
good example for
I
a
would
value
I would
right.
say sorry, I would say it's the market that's delivered that value though in laptops. You know, more you know more than the government. Yeah, and I think technology would be a particular area where it would fail, and we would be stuck with slow plodding machines
But,
with limited functionality,
but we
all
wouldn't.
because the slow mechanism of government is slow to move.
But let me disagree because I'm not saying we go to that's the only place you can get stuff. I think what would fail is trying to sell laptops. We would lose money. We would find we could not sell laptops in this because it's too slow moving. Not until Moore's law wears out or something, because otherwise you would have manufacturers, international if need be, come in and have fancier, better things for cheaper.
Mm.
So you would, I you would be
Well,
spending
let me
more to buy it at the commissary and get
Well, let me
something that
ask you a
was.
question. Right? You've heard the criticisms.
Mhm.
You've acknowledged them to extent. How would you mitigate against them? You know, two-tier society, um, slow innovation,
Well,
monopolistic inefficiencies. You know,
I would
how
maybe
would,
limit the government on when they could introduce new products, right? You would have to have ethical standards, which some industries do have this, but you'd have to promote them to the social and political level of what it means to have something practical, and it would be proved in the market first, right? There would be no room for the government to invest in inventing cell phones. It would have to be 10, 20, 30 years after we already realized, geez, this is a part of the social infrastructure now. Geez, people need to have telephones, so we sell a black, regular telephone that people can have. And then I think the biggest thing, like you could never do this in America right now, you'd need a shift in our social ethics, because I think one of the biggest problems is you have individuals making decisions, and they make those decisions to give contracts to their cousin or their backers or their political contributors, and so you'd have to have a way to stop that kind of corruption. Um, and that's the general thing, which I mean, those are kind of the general sort of ideas that all fall under having an appropriate ethics about the purpose of this store, and that it not be to undermine the market, right? You can subsidize the prices. It would have to be cost plus a percent and this kind of thing. It's not. It would
mm,
have to. You'd have to guard against some of the socialist ideas of. You'd have to guard against this idea of why can't everybody just have the best TV? No, this is not the best, but it also, you'd have to watch that it wasn't crap, that it's like, here's some glasses so we can say you have glasses. No, it has to be a quality standard, like those pens, like the damn
mm.
pens. I want the pens. That's all I'm saying. Okay, what was the
Well,
other thing you said? We disagreed and it got acrimonious level of disagreement about quantum
let me
mechanics.
just
Okay, but
stick
we
with
still
this for a
have an hour.
second.
I'm worried I'll
It's
run out of
it's a
time.
bit of a tangent, but it's definitely still political. What I'd say is you've conceded a bit of mine. What I can say is about your idea is that yeah, it has some merit and it's probably worth pursuing to some extent, etc., etc. With you know these worries taken on board. But to me, have you seen the video about the wealth distribution in America? You must with the huge graph about that 1% as. Have you seen that video?
Well, I don't know if I've seen that video,
Hmm.
but yeah, I've seen that
Well,
graph.
there's this really good video about the inequality in America and
Is
the
there?
wealth distribution.
Hmm. I might
Now,
have seen it.
and it starts off saying what it says we surveyed before it delivers the real data. It says we surveyed Americans and asked them what they would like it to be. and then they say, what do they think it is? And I forget how it progresses. But
Hmm.
for my part, when we talk about politics and addressing rights and wrongs, I think you talk about equal starting chances as far as possible being
Hmm.
provided, right? And you talk about writing that distribution, looking to fix that distribution. And what I would say again as a kind of criticism on that method is while it has a certain amount of social justice and an improvement feel to it and stuff, I don't think it gets to the core of the problem of that income distribution. I think you tackle the core problem, and and you said this is just wrong.
Yeah.
That's just too rich. It's just and once you and you actually end up not needing your solution if
No,
you end
that's
up
true.
getting a fair distribution.
I think you're right.
Um, and education, is people. We, I know we talked it a bit prior video, but like essentially neurotypicals get stuck in a rat race such that they never I feel, have time to consider these philosophical issues. They're not educated to it, you know. And that's my approach. You see,
Right.
um,
Well, I
so
accept that. I think that is a primary thing. I still think that people would want to get together and make just practical brown box just to ride on this pen thing. But the thing is, if there was more income distribution, we could do that. We're doing it even now with Kickstarters without the income distribution, with new ways to pool our money. Hey, I think I probably have seen that video because I've definitely seen the graphs of the distribution, and I've
I'll link
read
it
a
to
lot
you,
on that.
sure.
Okay, but I think I might have seen that one because I remember the survey part of it. But do you know this part of that thing? The funny thing to me is at the bottom of that top 1%, income-wise in the U.S., and I think worldwide it might even be true, you really have the working wealthy, like doctors and lawyers, that if they get sick and can't work, they're basically in the same kind of situation as any other working person, but they might go into it with more savings. They might be able to hook in before they hit rock bottom, and move to a smaller house. But basically, they're having to work. And if you look at the top 1%, it's really the top 1% of that group. In other words, the top 0.1% that has all the money. It's
No, no,
amazing.
no, no, no. It's that 1%. If you're in the 1% of that owning that wealth, you're not a doctor. I mean, they're in the upper end of the middle class. If you look at the distribution, these people are making,
I saw.
millions, tens of millions, and probably millions just in pure investment returns.
I, I
Um,
think you.
that's my perception.
I think if you're making, if you're a lawyer that's making $400,000, $500,000 a year, it starts to be the top 1%.
I don't think so. Uh, not no. But anyway, we'll settle that. We'll go on to the quantum physics. Maybe take a
Yeah, you're right.
tangent
Let's
for
not spend.
politics if you want.
Okay, I'm just gonna make a note of things to correct Hythloday on later.
Yeah, we'll settle that on.
Yeah, I'd
And
like to get down to the number, but what I do believe is true is that the top 1%, that income, the shape of that curve continues, so that the top 0.1%, it starts to get really ridiculous how much is actually down at that 1/1000th of the population. But anyway, yeah, we'll look at that later, and you're going to send me that link or
yeah,
something. You
I
could,
shall await your correction.
yeah.
Sure.
Well, I'm just joking, But I mean,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think it's a
So,
good idea because we did decide we wouldn't just go, that we would watch the clock a little bit, and we still have plenty of
mm,
time now. But it's a way to not have to look up stuff and maybe generate some videos. Always looking for video ideas.
mm.
So you said another thing we disagreed on, though. We could talk about politics, but maybe just go back and forth since we started with this. You said we got acrimonious about quantum mechanics, and I
Well,
would
I
just,
did. I must have done. If you don't,
yeah.
you probably didn't.
I remember us arguing about it, so all I wanted to say though was that from my point of view, your opinion's changed a lot. from when we really got into it. I mean, you have studied it a lot since then, and you are a lot closer to my position. You don't accept the probability, but you know, I mean, I don't know how to put it. You're better informed. I know we still don't agree. We've been talking about it a little bit recently on this, like the physical nature or not of probability and what probability is. But so anyway, the question is, what was the disagreement, as you recall, over quantum mechanics that got to too heated of a state?
Well, specifically, I probably couldn't tell you. I could say that over the course of the years, um, I do remember, and this might not have been quantum mechanics, but you was like, do you not remember? You was like, "Hello," and it really got my goat when you said that
No,
to
I
me.
do
Like,
remember that, but I'm
you
not
remember
asking.
that
Look,
weren't that was before the commissary business, you know,
look,
and
I
it
know
was like,
20 ways to piss you
yeah.
off. I'm not saying I
Yeah,
don't remember
yeah,
that.
yeah. Right.
I'm saying, what was the
So it
disagreement?
might not have been a point in quantum mechanics other
Okay, yeah.
than the not matching together, you know, of the
Yes,
point to point. You know what I mean?
yes. Well, that's what I do when somebody really,
I
really
remember.
pisses me off. So, okay, my apologies. Let's just say my apologies on that. But
But
on the quantum mechanic thing, you seem to have come to me a long way in my direction, or maybe not in my direction, but you're definitely more well informed. A lot of your arguments are coming more from, well, for example, you were talking about, you made this excellent point in a recent video about what's going on with the slits, not the wave duality part, but it's like the point of the size of the slit, because I always say the point of the size of the slit is because of the wave mechanics. It changes the diffraction angle and all this. No, you made a much better point that the issue has to do with like the uncertainty principle. You have to have a situation where there's a range of uncertainty in order to demonstrate that the uncertainty is, according to quantum mechanics, real. Not
mhm.
just lack of knowledge, but
Yeah.
by having that uncertainty. So that's a point I see you making now that I don't think, that I'm like, hello, probably in the past about, right? So,
Yeah, well, this comes and goes, doesn't it? I mean, of course, I'm more informed now, but I think our differences. I remember for the longest while, I've been aware of the significance of the fact that there are different interpretations. And when they say that, what they mean is they're equally valid interpretations. And I felt that you was overly wed to your particular um,
well, okay.
interpretations. What I thought is in defending your interpretations, um, you had this sort of the position of much of the scientific community, which is like an acceptance of it, insofar as I'm always making these points that, look, what they talk about when they talk about this probability wave is not something real. They're talking, and they will acknowledge it. This probability wave is an abstract idea that belongs to it, that it has this abstract idea touched to it. It's not in the thing that's wibble wobbling about in the probabilities is not the same as what is claimed to be, say, wibble wobbling about in a field, perhaps, which a field in itself is an abstract mathematical idea. It's not
Right.
really a claim to exist,
But no,
because
no.
whenever you have a field, there are other mathematical ways of dealing with the idea and notion of the field.
But it's still a
And
thing. I mean, it's like saying two-dimensional space. That's still a thing, even though you can represent it with Cartesian coordinates or radial coordinates. And I mean, quantum field theory does say there's a field. There's nothing really known about that field, even as well as we know about the electric field. And I agree, it's just a word, and we haven't really got a philosophical concept for field that gets to some kind of like why does it exist level. But basically, it's a thing where every point in space has its own value of it. I mean, are you going to say the same thing about the gravitational field? That
well, you must have missed my most recent point was exactly about the gravitational field, and after
I
rewatching
think I do have
Susskind
a
again,
video.
and the point is with the equivalence principle, Yeah. Um, a guy can say it's a thing, it's a field. I've got a field. Look, I'm measuring every bit of point of space. I get
Hmm.
this acceleration, and he's misinformed because he's in a room being pulled, and because of the equivalence principle. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that one example completely annihilates the idea that of the physical reality of a field.
No.
The field. Hang on. The field.
Sorry. Go
I see
ahead.
it that way. The field, right? And much of the math is just that to produce. What I'm saying is it's not
Yeah.
explanatory enough. Yeah, it's not real. What it does is makes predictions as if. Yeah, you can watch one scientific program and it'll talk about how like the gravity is like this river flowing in, and that the
Hmm.
space is a river flowing in. That is taking the idea of a field too literally.
Oh, I agree.
You watch Suskind, and he'll say, "Well, it's not really flowing. Nothing's really flowing. It's the principle." Is it divergence? Yeah, the measure of the flow into a region. Yeah, and it's all mathematics to come up with an answer, but it actually fails, to my mind, the idea of a field to be
Right.
explanatory. You know.
Okay, right. Well, my approach, I mean, I think there's some semantics in this that are important. Um, in my way of looking at it is that it just means fields are relativistic. It doesn't mean there is no electric field. It means that it is a real thing. We don't necessarily understand it or characterize it. It's not our current characterization of that a phenomena is not final. So, but it doesn't mean it's not real because, like the meaning of the word "real," let's say take something, like an apple that we would say was real. It's still the same. What makes it real is still our predictive characteristic of its nutrition, and
You,
that if I throw it at you, you catch it, and there's no difference in what it means to be real. There's a consistent phenomena, and that's all that of interactivity with us through our
of
senses.
course, you're
So
being
it's
so
real.
broad with the term "real," though.
Well, what do
You're
you
being
mean by saying it's unreal, I guess? Let me ask you the question that way.
that it has equivalent interpretations. Of course, there's a phenomena, and the math allows us to calculate what will happen, what will really happen as we might measure it. Okay, but the idea is that in one guy can be in a room, yeah, and say, "Oh, there's a field," yeah,
Hmm.
and really he's being pulled by a spacecraft. Another guy can be in another room and say, "Ah, there's a field," and he's on a planet, not being pulled. So
Right.
in the sense that there is actually a field, just because you measure it and you detect phenomena, does not mean there is this higher dimensional, ethereal. Um, what is it's a mathematical structure that allows us to make predictions, almost as
Uh,
if it's really as if there was a field. Yeah, the guy who's being towed in by the space rocket can model his reality with there being a field. Yeah, and it will work really well. He'll be able to say, look, at every point in space, I have this acceleration, and I'll call this a field. Yeah, just like whatever in analogies of a field, like a temperature
uh,
field in his room. Yeah, but but like just the same way that a temperature field, um, the variations of temperature at the point don't really explain the idea that the thermometer is reading out that value at that point because of the vibration of the molecules. Just the same way that mathematical conception of a field in temperature isn't real, so it isn't real for the guy in the room being accelerated. Yet it will fulfill its purpose and allow him to make lots of time evolution predictions as though it was real. And there's nobody can convince. If it was you in the room and I tried to explain the equivalence principles of mathematics and how there's one structure can be redesigned in another structure, can be redesigned in another structure, and they're all literally equivalent. um, you wouldn't be able to be convinced from the idea that no, it's a real field.
Well,
To me,
okay. The thing is, first of all, there's something. This is one of the deep unknowns that we have, which is this apparent equivalence and yet totally separateness between gravitational mass and inertial mass. And my interpretation of Einstein is that those really are equivalent situations. You're in an accelerated frame, and we don't understand gravity well enough to understand how it is you're in an accelerated frame. And that's where some people are saying, well, space is collapsing down into the object. I don't particularly buy that, but that's an attempt at saying, no, there's something really truly unifying. And in the temperature example, there is a temperature field. The fact that you measure the temperature at a point with a particular device that measures vibration, that's how you measure electric field. That's how the point to me is that there is a phenomena. Okay, okay, excuse me. So here, I'm sorry, just a moment. Okay, I guess that's good enough. So we'll just. All right. So anyway, so I would say the temperature thing, there is a field, and when you say it's not real, I don't think you're really doing this, but I'm just explaining. It comes to me as though you're denying the phenomena. Like we have to characterize the phenomena exactly correctly before we talk about there being a phenomena. And I'm just to bring it back to quantum mechanics, I'm saying obviously something that's very much like a wave, and explain that how it's mathematically like a wave, hits both slits, goes through both slits, has interference, and then we see the results of that interference. It certainly makes it seem physical, whatever the word real means, because you're probably on camera. You're not? Okay. It certainly seems like we could
a
call
little bit of a it's got a forehead.
a little bit, yeah, your forehead on. So, so I'm sorry that's broken up. But in the case of quantum mechanics, the point is that if something is existing in space in two different places, such that it then interacts in space with itself, there's a reality, there's a physical reality, whether we've characterized exactly what it is or not. Whether we're Feynman going, we don't really understand it, Feynman would still tell you that proves that it's happening in our spatial realm out here. It's not just a mathematical, the same debate happened, and ironically, Einstein was the one, whoever it was, not Pauli, I always get it confused, the guy who did the mathematics for the photons, assuming that there was an oscillator. He thought that was a mathematical trick. It was Einstein that proved no, photons are particles, right? That they had a physical reality, and the way that's accomplished is because you identify that it's occurring in space and can interact with other things in space. And if you play with it out there in the real world and you see interactions, then it's physical, because that's what physical means. It interacts with us in the real world.
Let me try and clear it up again. Right, what I'm trying to say about fields is they're not explanatory because they're an abstract idea, okay? And they have equivalent. The reason they're not explanatory is because, for the same reason, if you say there's a temperature field, and that's as far as your mind goes, and you say there's a temperature field, the idea is that at every point in space, intrinsic to space is a temperature value. And it's not intrinsic. That's the idea that flows from a field, is that the finite
that it's a part of space? No, that it's distributed in space. Every point in space can be said to have a temperature. That's not true in the sense of like there's no apple field. Every point of space does not have an apple in it. That would be pretty arbitrary. I guess you could do that. Most of the space has zero apple.
I think you may be just being a bit too picky about the language I've used.
Well, let me ask you this then. I see what you're getting. I don't want to try to get at it. I'm not trying to.
Well, let me finish the explanation about what I'm saying, though.
Okay, and then go on to the electric field, because I would like it from analogy.
Yeah,
right.
I don't believe in electric field neither. Right, so if that's the end result, is any field is indistinguishable from another interpretation. Yeah, so I say the temperature field, and you say I've discovered the temperature field, and somebody else says no, there's no temperature field. What there is jiggling electrons. Yeah, you can model it as though there's a field and do lots of valuable work, but I found an explanatory value for this jiggling. Yeah, with gravity, what I can say is that I can say I found an acceleration field, and another guy can say no, you're actually being because you're being pulled, yeah, by a spacecraft. Another person could say I'm in a computer system whereby the configuration of states in my reality are
Hmm.
updated in a computer simulation, which is equivalent to the field mathematical model. And there's
Yeah.
probably countless other models
Infinite,
which
let's say.
when you have these, if one model, mathematical model, has an equivalent other model, there is nothing. Feynman makes this point for us in one of his videos. I've uploaded it about. It's called the problems and many mathematical interpretations. Yeah, and he admits to it. He says there's all these mathematical interpretations, and he says the only thing that's useful about a particular one is how it makes our mind make the next guess at
Hmm.
probing nature. Right, so he
Right.
concedes that in a sense that they're
Yeah.
mathematical, and it's true.
Right.
If you
Well,
don't
I'm a
accept
relativist, but
that
that's
the
what I
idea
accept.
of a field is an abstract, it's a fact. Yeah,
No,
that
I
a
do.
field
I do
is an
accept that.
abstract idea. An abstract idea, by definition, means it's just like circles. There's no real circles that we can produce.
Right.
They're an abstract idea, and
Right.
they
But
exist in
what
the
I'm saying
mind.
is, I expect that, and I've expected it most of my life because I mean, for to go back to the Cartesian versus polar coordinates, um, I I expect an even an infinite number, though there might be, some of these systems might be arbitrary modifications on similar systems. So maybe there's nodes of a certain number of systems, but basically, by assumption, even I would grant my starting point is there's an infinite number of coordinate systems, even fundamentally unique ones. And so Cartesian coordinate systems can describe two-dimensional space, and polar coordinate systems and hyperbolic coordinate systems. There is two-dimensional space, and there's also always something related between the systems that'll do it, and that is their dimensionality. You take two free variables. Any of these systems to describe two-dimensional space take two free variables. So when
Okay.
you characterize the electric field and you find the free number of variables, which is three dimensionals plus this, or the string theorists, who, by the way, are getting blown out of
So
the water. So, I mean, maybe you get where I'm getting at. So,
yeah,
so there,
I think you've made a good.
you wouldn't say two-dimensional space doesn't exist,
I'll
probably, or
use
maybe you
your
would.
analogy, right? Yeah. The way I see you within your own analogy there of space is like being, when you get married to the idea of an existent field, is like getting married in your, it's not really an analogy because
Mhm.
it's true, it's a comparative, isn't it? But the way I see you is like getting married to Cartesian coordinates. Yeah, that's when you're married to a field interpretation. It's equivalent to being married to a particular coordinate system. You're saying there's real space, and I would agree. But what I'm saying is about the field interpretation, there is a real phenomena. We agree, but the definitive explanatory value and real nature of fields is not on the same footing as saying space is real, the phenomena's real. Put this particle here, it'll move in X time. Yeah, the field value, the field interpretation of it is on the same footing as the Cartesian coordinate system. If you get married to that, or polar, or you know, cylindrical or curvilinear, coordinate systems, like you said, the infinite curvilinear system, you could just pick any random. But to me, it's like you're married and claiming the reality of the particular coordinate system when you get married to the idea of a field?
Well, I think just like no matter what the what the coordinate system, a given square, whether you plot it on one coordinate system or another, the distance that you calculate from one corner to the other will be the same. So I think we can rely on the quantum model enough, for example, or enough to say, for example, that there is a distributed phenomena, that electron, that when it hits the screen looks like a point-like particle, that actually we know that there was a phenomena distributed in space, not just on the direct line between the emitter
Well,
and the speck.
we're
We know it's gone through both slits.
we're in total agreement, yeah, that there's
Okay,
this phenomena. There are all these phenomena. We measure them, we look at them, because, and like I said, in the disagreement between quantum mechanics now, it becomes, that was the probability thing, waves and fields we're talking about. Just trying to get back on track because we've come off the main. We've
and this is the kind of issue that tends to go into a
issue.
So, well, that's a good time to move on, or to recollect in this way, because I would say, for example, an alternate system to the standard model is supersymmetry and string theory. Okay, and supersymmetry is something that physicists have started to accept, but not now, because the LHC should have shown some of the predicted particles. So, we don't have, we're working hard on other models for this thing, none of which will end up denying that something goes through, or appears to go through, or something is interacting through both slits at once and shows up in one place. And, so far, I mean, supersymmetry, was a more full and yet compatible kind of model that is being disproved now. Basically, supersymmetry is dying. The news hasn't gotten very far out, but that's what's happening. And string theory, of course, suffers from this purely mathematical reverse engineering, but the supersymmetry version of it was able to make some predictions that are failing now. So we don't have another system.
I love that guy. You put me in touch with that Wolfram. That video, I'd seen a short one of him, but the long one, and I'm big on hidden non-local variable interpretations, and essentially digital physics, simulated, and all. It's like you said. When I say simulated universe, I don't mean to be a crackpot thinking there's. I think it's like you said. You accept whatever reality is, then that's just reality, and I just think it fits more of the things that we have trouble. Paradoxical natures. The only thing that resolves to me most of the paradoxes is the idea that the nature of reality. And it doesn't mean it's a computer, but it could be. It could be. I imagine, like, if you've seen those cellular autonoma that he does. I mean, they're only 2-dimensional, but I imagine 3-dimensional cellular autonoma, possibly.
Yeah, and he's done 3-dimensional ones, and he's done ones with color and stuff. But he finds that the characteristics are pretty much evident in the 2-color ones. Yeah, I fell in love with him back before he dropped out and went recluse when he was a young 20-something, prodigy-like physicist, and fell in love with the game of life and stuff. This is one of the reasons I program.
Well, he's got me interested in wanting to do it myself,
It's fun to play with. It's definitely fun to play with. And by the way, mathematics degrees are you make you look like an expert. You want to. If you end up enjoy programming, it's a pretty good way to, jumpstart into programming, because it's very useful. And yet there's programmers that aren't so good, especially these days, at mathematics. And so there's a subset.
I'm thinking of that. They require a lot of functions. I know.
Absolutely.
My cousin is a bit of a web programmer, and from time to time I've said, well, just tell me what you want it to do, and I'll just write. I'll make you a function that'll do that. And I can imagine there's lots of mathematics people don't understand how to program the inners of those procedures or functions.
Right, but there definitely are, because one thing is that it's like logic and logicians. Some, like logicians from philosophy, they don't adapt to programming that well, because in programming, illogic runs. Right?
Mm.
That's where bugs come from and stuff. But the other thing of where you can really become a high-powered expert programmer because of a mathematical background, if you like programming, which is sort of a separate thing. We all have our tastes, and it can just be like doing math problems for people that don't like it. But is in complexity theory. I don't know if you've looked into complexity theory, but in big O notation and stuff,
No.
that's all the mathematical proofs based on the Turing machine, which has nothing to do with the Turing test, except for Turing is the
No.
same dude. Yeah. So, there's a lot of things proved about why, even given Moore's law and 1,000 years, we're not going to solve the game of chess, because it's actually complex enough that we can't solve it. Or the traveling salesman problem. We can classify certain kinds of problems and know that we need a revolution in computing, or maybe sometimes a quantum computer. But with a Turing machine, we're not going to be able to solve certain problems in the life of the universe. And by solve, when you solve a game, that means you can look all the way to the end, always
Mm.
choose a move that has a winning result, and you will win. So, no computer has to lose at checkers.
What that's a great conversation. I actually want your advice on some things related to that. But just to pull it back to the quantum, what do you think? I've tried. I don't know whether Inmendham's going to pick up the horn or whatever the saying is. To say, okay, we disagree about the two slit. How about entanglement? Yeah,
He
you
won't.
know,
He won't.
you won't pick that up
That
because
reminds me.
because that's the other test. When they say, that that's old news, the two slit. Where it's at now, that really proves the two slit is the entanglement principle, to my liking. So you've got to really move on and say, all right, everything they've said. If you can't win his argument with the two slit, you're just moving on and say, well,
Yeah.
what about entanglement then?
Well, I don't know,
You know.
but that would be my prediction. But you reminded me of something else that we moved on from, that was on that, when I had said that you've grown a lot and become much better informed. And not to say that I know, but I just, and you acknowledged that you've looked at a lot more stuff. And I think I feel it in the quality of your presentation. But you said, well, of course I moved on. No, not of course. I mean, Gary, he has learned, but very stubbornly and slowly. And of course, I don't know that he would even admit he has moved on. But I mean, one of my first arguments with him, I think the first time he blocked me, was when he made this statement about the speed of light and something appearing to go twice the speed of light, and me trying to, I probably said, hello. That's what relativity is saying, and so maybe he had reason to get mad at me. But it is not common, and I don't know how you perceive videos, over this long period. But I spent 6 years here and 5 years blogging, and I mean, I've been doing this kind of hobby since the mid '80s, before the internet, on BBSs, and no, people do not usually visibly expand. If they do expand, they rarely admit it. It's rarely as visible as your study of quantum mechanics and related phenomena in the past 4 years has been.
Well, that's because
Give
I've been
yourself
studying a
credit.
mathematics degree. I mean,
Well, that as well.
I've done a
I'm really
mathematics
impressed
degree,
by that.
and I've done self-study essentially in ethics. Loads of good high quality academic level ethics stuff on the internet, but I don't think I don't know what you. It sounds rather patronising the way you say it, yeah.
Really?
Like,
because I don't think so. I'm trying to say you should give yourself
no,
credit.
no. Well, the thing is I spent the last 4 or 5 years educating myself, and obviously my opinions. But I don't think I've not had a paradigm shift, as in which is
No, I don't think
betrayed
so
my
either.
early. that's the way it comes across that
But
you're
that's why
sort
most
of
people don't admit it. That's why most people
applauding
don't
me
admit
on oh, now you've come to see it in the new paradigm, the correct, perspective.
right. But I
And
did that
I don't
specifically.
see that. I wouldn't
Well, let
concede
me
that. I
defend
would say
myself.
I've only, yeah, I'll just finish this sentence. I'll just say
Okay.
in I only see it as that I've further enhanced my arguments to prior things. I can't see where I've
Right.
retracted.
Well, two things. One, in defense of myself, I said this as I was describing this. I said not that you've come closer to agreeing with me, but just that I can feel that your knowledge is becoming fuller on this. Now, I think
Mm,
some of your opinions have changed and become closer to me because I spend a lot of time trying to get people to think about some of the arguments I'm making with respect to facts that I have informed me. But I specifically said that it's not that you've come to
I know
agree
you
with
try
me.
to temper it,
But also the thing is, I'm a relativist. I do not believe that people that grow are all going to come to my position and live in my house and sleep in my bed with me. You know what I'm saying? People are on their own paths, and yet some people are, there's nobody really stuck, but there's a lot of people, especially online, that go way out of their way not to show their evolution. And people that do evolve openly, to me, they do come more into themselves. They fill out their own perspectives. I believe that's what I have done. On the other hand, I have grown a lot. I've developed
Mm.
terms for my
Well,
philosophy, new arguments, and new ideas that are
I
different
do
than
accept
6 years
it,
ago.
but I'm just trying to give you a bit of feedback, honest feedback here, and
But
that's
that's
why
because,
we
okay,
can
well,
still. It it's
I just want to put that
I
back on you.
appreciate it. I appreciate it what you said.
But I want to put that back on you because here's where, and this could be a criticism, but just an honest one or where I'm coming from type thing. And it's not on you personally, but I know that that is how that kind of comment appears to people. But is
Oh,
that my
well,
problem?
that's all right. Well,
Why
that's
can't
it.
I tell people
See,
they've grown? When you tell people, no, let me finish, please. Uh-oh. But no. When you tell people that they've grown, why should that be an insult that they weren't already perfect? That's not how life is.
I'll tell you why. Right. I'm very cautious. You have to be cautious in complimenting. I think maybe I don't receive compliments well,
Me
but
neither.
I think it's a dangerous thing. If I say, see, I've come on here and you know, I just say this. See, I'm trying to choose my
Well,
words
how have I
correctly
grown?
as well.
How have I grown?
Exactly,
I want to
exactly,
grow. I want to
exactly,
grow, and you're telling me I
exactly.
haven't grown?
I,
You're rude. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah. No, no. I mean, I'm not saying you haven't because I think um, I think if I say, "Well done, Pyro," right? You have. I take this, and there's a certain amount of truth in this, I think. But I also could say this about myself in praising myself, right?
Hmm.
But the reason is, I do say this to myself, and I do think this about you. But I wouldn't say it because I know you said you understood how it sounds, and the point is you bite your tongue. Now I'm sat on the piece of information. I can tell you how you've grown, and I'll now do it, and I'll say, you know, you've become more conciliatory towards me. In a
Yeah.
just off the cuff. I've not pre-thought about my thoughts about you. Just pulling out the air, I'll say that one way you've grown is in our interactions. We've both found a way to be conciliatory towards each other
Yeah.
and get back to terms where we can make dialogue. In that way, we've both grown. But I don't praise you on that because it's as though I'm you know, praise is usually given by the authority figure, you see.
Or
So if I do
manipulative
that,
person.
yeah, maybe, whatever. But
Hmm.
that's the why it kind of just scratches a little bit,
Hmm.
when you praise somebody. So I tend not to
Yeah.
praise people,
Yeah.
unless I'm the authority figure. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and that's probably the
Uh,
wise thing. But like when we're talking about the honesty and how, the typical person thinks, I have incorporated as one of my duties to honesty to try to acknowledge this sort of stuff. Because, for example, I consider this a very important topic, that where to me, when I was talking to you, even back when you were making me angry, I was thinking about the parts of trying to learn who you are, from my point of view, and what makes you tick, and praise the parts that were cool, and figure out why you thought the way you did. And in that I found a lot of interesting things. Your history of working in the coal mine and then deciding to start a math degree, and this is all evolution, a personal evolution of a life that it has like a substance to me. And by doing that, I do that with everybody, and then I try to take what I think I may have learned, and in my future interactions with people, really, no matter how negative or harsh, or I don't know, I don't want to use those words, but acrimonious, however it got when we were quarreling, really, like it was hard to take. Even after that, I tried to use it, and then rarely do people react. Their views are already set in stone. Whereas if they were doing the same thing, you can get past those kinds of troubles and work them out. And if we could all learn how to do that in the world, maybe we don't have to fight wars for thousands of years. And so it's a good subject to talk about that kind of growth, because in this case, there's kind of a conscious methodology in my case, and you must have a similar methodology, whether it's conscious or not, I don't know.
It's
That, yeah.
It's a good concept to talk about growth and this, that, and the other in an abstract sense, or in a non-personal sense. But I mean, don't get me wrong. I've been called arrogant plenty times, but I'm always trying to wrestle with what's perceived of arrogance. Sometimes it just seems like being of a strong personality, of confidence to put your opinions in the circle, seems to get that tag. But I would say that there's a when you praise somebody, there's a feature of it of condescension, and condescension is,
Yeah, but I think it's
would normally could bring about either the accusation of condescension or arrogance.
I just rather dive into that, but I don't disagree with you. But what about this example? For example, antinatalism in my interaction with Gary, separate those two or one and a half things. I believe that my interaction with the antinatalists, as well as other people arguing with them, has caused growth in antinatalism, an idea I disagree with and have criticism, but they have developed it. For one, they weren't calling it antinatalism. They learned that word. They've written books. They have made a cohesion out of their ideas, where now they can present it as a school of philosophy, whereas it was much more scattered 6 years ago. How do you really describe this to people? Now they can describe it like people from a school of philosophy. It has been developed, and I disagree with it, right? And I don't, and my feeling towards it hasn't gotten softer. If anything, it's gotten harder. But I think that growth, this might be a segue into this whole spiritual stuff. I don't know if we'll have time to get into that. It's getting towards the end. We'll have to do that again later. But, that there's a path of growth that takes you to somewhere on the map, hopefully a place you were trying to get to. And so I would like a way to talk to people that are doing that, because they're going to a destination I don't necessarily agree with, or you could say they're realizing the place they're in. But let me talk about it as a destination where they're increasing the clarity, getting to a point of increased clarity, and that might be a place I don't agree with, but it's better than people that want to just stick with what we have now. It could be good to stick with what you have now, I think, in an individual case, but the world's pretty screwed up, and we don't need a lot of sticking with, oh, I know what I got now. I think we need some growth. So I do praise growth, and rarely do I find that the people I praise that way are wandering to my location. I have a very weird perspective that I don't expect people to come
I ask you the question, why do you praise it?
Because there's been this growth and development. It's like a project.
Why do you?
Well, why would I praise somebody that writes a piece of software that does something I don't need to done? It's an accomplishment. Why would I praise
Right,
an
right.
architect that
Because
builds a
right, yeah.
building I don't
No,
go into?
exactly, exactly. The thing is with somebody who writes a piece of software, yeah, is that that's standalone and clearly nothing to do with you, right? When we are engaged in personal dialogue, and as you've just referenced, you make it sound like antinatalism has grown because of you, and it may
Well,
be true.
I
It,
did, me and you and all the people that have argued against it. And other people don't realize this. They think they're taking it down. Guess what? Young Earth creationism has grown stronger because of all the YouTube, in my opinion. Guess
I'm
what?
not
This is,
questioning the fact of the matter.
yeah.
I'm questioning the need to bring it to attention. Yeah, I can say um,
Mhm.
Joe Blogs has just made this wonderful piece of software, and it's just made my life so easy. He is external to my life. If he hears that praise, he takes it for what it is, a genuine. There's obviously no connection. But if I say, Joe Blogs, I bumped into him and I had a chat and I said, and I'd been talking about software and the need for development, and he's brought this, and so it's kind of my fault. You know what I mean? The fact that I need to articulate that, it says something about me that I need to be known, and it seems like
Mm.
when you if I grow, if Inmendum grows, I think I feel Inmendum's influence upon me in certain ways. Um, and I think with given our prayer talk, I think he influences you.
Yeah.
Um, and
Absolutely
and
acknowledge that.
so we're all making each other grow, but and
No.
you've had generally, all right. It's a bit of hyperbole. It's gonna generally. We're all meaning
Technically, it's
some
true,
people. There's some
but
people
it's not
making.
all
If
equal.
I have to, no, of course it's not, right?
That's
But
important. Well, I'm saying it's not
if
all
I
equal.
have to qualify, I'm just talking casually here. If I have to make sure that there's no hint of hyperbole, and it just, of course, if I say all, I'm just being loose here. I don't mean all people grow and all people acknowledge blah blah blah, and to different, and everybody does it equally. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just
Well,
being
like
loose in the language.
Well, like when Gary has watched a lot of Feynman videos, and I don't think he did so with a particularly open mind. He watched it with an anchor where he went in to do denialism. You have been open to the argument. That doesn't mean you've just accepted everything he said. It doesn't mean you've come to my interpretation. But I think that's worth commenting on. Now, am trying to process and probably can't process right here this idea of you ought properly have more detachment before you praise something. Like I can praise a film that I have nothing to do with, but I can't praise a film I helped be involved with. Or to me, I don't get that. It's like to me we're like
Well, it's
commenting on.
incidental, you see, and you can't quantify it, right? If you was involved in a film and you designed the set, then you can go, fucking look at that film. It's magnificent. Look at the set. It's great. That film's great because of me. You've got a genuine claim. But it's a bit much to start. You've had what I wanted to say earlier. I started saying it. You've had several guys probably, but a recent one, saying a text dialogue guy, and he's saying he's going to teach you. I'm your teacher, sort of situation, yeah.
Mhm.
And when that sort of outlook, sort of feeling seems to come from you at times, as though you feel you're better than us, teaching us, and that's the way we receive the praise, yeah.
Well, I
I'm
mean, you go through
just
these diagrams.
but
Is that
I
avoidable?
can't, you're gonna get it honest, this
Yeah.
way it is.
But
Uh,
But don't you think you come across? I mean, this is the thing that people that do just comments often say about any of us that make videos. And I don't know that there is a way or that it would be good not to come across that way. I mean, for example, you have some of the awesome looking diagrams that I guess you've made yourself, and they're fantastic, and your ethics diagrams and stuff in the circles, you certainly, that style looks like a lecture and you're showing us how it works. But I have known you well enough to know, no, I have just put how I think about this on paper so you can see how I think, and so I interpret it as sharing, not
Yeah.
as a condescending lecture.
Well, yeah. Well, I hope so
So other
because
people have to, the viewers are responsible for that. They've got to grow if they have a problem. That I
right.
can't tell how I think without being telling other people to be like me. I mean, my instinct is I don't want people, anybody, like my mom had a picture on the thing on the wall that said, I'd rather sit on have a pumpkin to myself than sit on a crowded velvet cushion. And that
You make
became a philosophy of my life. So I'm not
you
trying to get people to
you
sit on
make
my
a good
pumpkin.
point. You make a good point. You, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, as a
I'll
Mendon would say,
proceed.
this is the psychology. If
Mhm.
you choose to praise, I've sat here and I smiled through it a lot because I know I wouldn't talk to you if I thought you really was that way. Yeah,
Mhm.
and it was something, you know, a deeper aspect of you because I've watched you talk honestly about your social regards, political aspirations, your philosophies, your interests in science and such,
Right.
and in a plainly spoken way that is contrary to what I'm talking about. This arrogance. I don't mean it as me labeling you it or
Right.
me. I
I
mean
don't
it as
take any
just pointing
offense
out
in
the
it.
fact that I don't do it because I know you're going to get loop sound, and I can't help. I'll have
Right.
to be honest and say it scratches a little. Not
Right.
a lot because of the end conversation
Well,
and so on. So you can take it on board, uh,
right.
and change or not because I refuse to change for people's psychologies. Um, if
Well,
in the sense that it's meant as genuine praise.
right.
You know, we either accept that or
Well,
not. I don't
I'm
know.
not in the. I can't totally argue that I'm not arrogant, and it depends on how people define it. But my ethical stance of going forward is that I believe in being opinionated, meaning having a lot of opinions. I don't expect other people to have the same opinions, and I celebrate them for having their own opinions. And
Hmm.
if they're trying to just praise or echo my opinions, which with Adam, who you were talking about, he was doing comments in my videos, and he was kind of doing a flattery sort of thing, and then repeating his own mindset. And I didn't want to necessarily touch or disturb that, but it grew to the point of I'd done enough comments for whatever reason. He was, and he was praising himself a lot and how he has this access to this pure truth and stuff, and using some terms that kind of set off my alarm bells about purity and righteousness. And then it got to the point where maybe I provoked it or he said it or whatever, that he wanted to be challenged and he craved a challenge. And then I started challenging him. And then all fell apart into how he was, that's how it was exposed that he was setting himself up to be my guru. Now, I
Hmm.
can't deny that there's aspects of that in myself. I can only say that consciously I try to mitigate that through my spiritual view or whatever philosophy, that everybody has to have their own path, and that progress is like on a two-dimensional map or three-dimensional or six-dimensional map. It is not on a one-dimensional line to the left and the right, to the good and the bad. It is, I want to go to the lake and he's going to the stables. You know, we both can make progress and we get further and further apart, right? And I make my judgments. Sometimes I'm like, that guy is going on a path that's, he says he wants to go to the pond and he's going to the seaside. Nothing wrong with the seaside, but that guy is maybe confused. So I make my judgments along the way, and I try to share navigational tools. I would say that I do think that in this process I've learned some navigational tools that could be shared with people that don't. It's not a compass that points you to where my pumpkin is, but it's a compass, and I think that that's maybe a conceit, because like with Nietzsche, I don't think any of his philosophy, his conclusions are things I endorse, but he's got a lot of those kinds of things, like little tools for reasoning and stuff that help me sort out what I think, and turns out to be different from him. So anyway, well, I
But
hope you did take the praise, meaning I don't think people show. I think everybody's growing. We're all growing each other. I think you've shared a process of getting more and more sophisticated ideas on math, obviously, because you were doing your degree and have finished it, and on physics, and you've also been open-minded. I've seen you listen. You put clips up there that are really important to me. You care like I do, Feynman and Susskind. You've shared a lot of clips that you thought were significant over the recent time, not so recent, but over I don't know. You've been doing that a long time, and I just see a progression that I like. I respect that. I do think that that's like an intellectual progress. And when you see people that devote their life to intellectual progress in philosophy or art, they go through their cubist phase and their various phases, and it's personal. But it's better that somebody that just gets a formula and says, "Oh, this one, I'll keep churning it out." To me, my own
I'll tell you
aesthetic.
another thing. I'm a bit sensitive to praise as well because of what I've just been through.
Oh,
It feels like everybody's, you know what I mean?
oh, really? Yeah. Well, you were a right asshole back when we were quarreling. If you that helps.
Yeah, yeah, that does.
So it is.
Uh,
It's 1 o'clock
can-
your time. I promise to stop, but you can go
yeah,
ahead and finish, or
I
you
just,
can
I
keep
just
talking.
want to
It's
say
only 8
about.
my time.
No, I want to at least get off this topic, but
Okay.
I was just thinking earlier. I think of myself being in terms of styles, right? Um, uh, I see you like a bit of a hippie style, right? With
Yeah.
your outlooks. I know. It's
But I'm not a hippie. I'm a head. But fine.
yeah, right. But um,
I'm a
and
head.
you're kind of spiritual, and you talk about these like, oh, it's just not everything's multidimensional, and there's truth to that. Don't get me wrong, right? But sometimes it allows you to really quickly move in a conversation from one arena to another. And I see myself and in Mendham, Gary, as not liking that, or clashing, not so much not liking, but clashing with it, because I see you move around, and it causes me a lot of bother. I think
Right.
I'm really trying to be at a point sometimes, and um, maybe unreasonably so sometimes. But
Yeah.
I was just reflecting on the difference of styles. If
Yeah.
I've grown over the YouTube career, it's and this would be something I would say I've taken off you is you've constantly said about your outlook about these clashes with other people and stuff. Um, and that's so I'm a bit more light-hearted about those difference of
Yeah.
styles and stuff, and you know,
Well, one
it,
thing I'm glad. This is one reason I'm glad too that we've managed to get past some of the severe, the part of like the acrimony that stopped conversation or made conversation difficult to do, was we do have very different styles, and I flit around, and it's a problem for me. And that's one thing I was saying about my drinking, is that I realized that one of the reasons, one of the things, and why talking to Dasbook, I just went, I guess I'm hyper. My brain is spinning all the time, and things are flying across it so much. It's just chaos. It's not a good thing. It's
mm,
not like, wow, I'm quick. It's like, no, I'm quick and squirrel. And so this was one of the things about drinking, I think, is that it slowed me down and kind of made the stuff move by slower. And then, because I have with my programming the ability to focus down on something and little
mm,
logical things, but it's through methodology, right?
mm,
That can be easily disturbed, and I've learned how to have noise, but it's because I know how to block it out. Really, if an idea comes out, if somebody says something to me and it comes through and I'm hearing it, it's hard for me not to think about it. There's certain ideas, in personal life especially, but in general, it's like, oh, I got to answer that, and and it can derail me, whereas you definitely have a steady. I could see how you were describing this in your in one of your videos recently, that you have a so-called slow way of learning, but you are not prone to mistakes that people that jump
Mm,
are. And I have tried to integrate that, and I think successfully. I mean, when I did this psychological test, part of it, well, it wasn't psychological entirely, it was this employment career stuff. So one of it was a math test. Well, I didn't finish it, and I thought, is this an honesty test? I have like 2 minutes each to do these. It's multiple choice. I'm not, and it was math, simple things like 1/4 minus 1/2 plus 1/8 or whatever.
mm,
And I'm not just going to do it and guess and then take the percentage that I was right. It's like, this is math. I work in science and stuff. I double check it. There's no reason to get it wrong. I have to look
mm,
at it. I have to do it 3 times, and I'll get it right. And uh, so, I have applied that, but where I'm coming from is not on that side. Where I'm coming from is very stochastic and like this whole just all over. So,
yeah, of course you couldn't function in programming if you weren't capable, but
yeah.
yeah, it's
Well, I think
no,
that's
it's
a good
been,
thing about us. I mean, it's a thing
mm,
about us collaboratively discussing things is that I believe this is triangulation. It's good that there's a million different people. It's good that some people can handle blood and guts and be doctors and, jam your hip replacement into your thing.
yeah, yeah,
And it's
sure.
fine. Some people can't take it. Luckily, we can cover a lot of bases that way. So
Mm.
anyway, yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
So.
so you're gonna let me go bed now, sleep.
Yeah, right. And so we didn't talk about ethics and life or spiritualism, so maybe we'll do it again.
Yeah, sure. All
Okay,
right,
all right, thanks. All
all
right,
right, good
thanks,
night.
Hythloday. Yeah, excellent. I had a great time. I hope you did too.
Yeah,
All
bye.
right, bye.